When someone is on your mind all the time, these three things are happening to that person. Psychology tips. Have you ever noticed how one person can quietly take up space in your head all day long? You can be busy, working, driving, watching something, talking with friends, and then out of nowhere, their face shows up. They laugh, their name. A little moment you didn't even try to remember. You tell yourself, I'm fine. I'm not going to reach out. So you don't call, you don't text, you keep your pride, keep your distance, yet somehow they still sit in the back of your mind like a song you can't turn off. But here's the truth most people don't talk about. When someone stays on your mind constantly, it's not always an obsession. It's not always a weakness. Sometimes it's your heart picking up a signal your mouth refuses to admit. And if that's happening to you, there's a good chance three things are also happening on their side, whether they realize it or not. Whether you believe it or not isn't something to argue about. Right now, let's get straight to the point. What those three things are, why they happen, and what's really going on behind all of it. Part 1. The universe is trying to tell you something. When a person keeps appearing in your mind day after day, understand this clearly. It is not random, it is not weakness, and it is not nostalgia playing tricks on you. It is information. The universe uses repetition because repetition creates results. Albert Einstein once said, "The most important decision we make is whether we believe we live in a friendly or hostile universe." A man with experience knows this. The universe does not send meaningless signals. It sends lessons, quietly, persistently. And when a person keeps returning to your thoughts, there are usually three things happening, inside you and on the other side. First, there is unresolved emotional energy, not drama, not fantasy, not longing. It is an unfinished loop. An old Stoic understands that a disciplined mind does not repeat without purpose. The mind repeats to solve, too close, to integrate what was learned. This is Stoicism in action. You observe the signal. You don't panic. You don't romanticize. You analyze. Emotions are not the enemy. Lack of clarity is. Second, there is subconscious imprinting happening in both directions. Attention rarely flows one way for long. Psychology shows that when someone occupies your mental space consistently, you often occupy theirs as well, especially when pride, distance, or bad timing prevents closure. This aligns closely with female psychology, where emotional bonds often remain active beneath the surface even after communication stops. Not attachment, not an obsession. Meaning. Meaning left unfinished. Third, there is a lesson being presented to strengthen you. Life does not repeat faces to trap men. It repeats lessons to train them. Carl Jung said it best. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So the real question is not why you are thinking about them. The real question is what you are meant to understand now. In modern life, men between responsibility, pressure, aging, and shifting relationships often confuse reflection with regret. They are not the same. Reflection sharpens, regret drains. Stoicism teaches separation, feeling from action, signal from impulse, memory from mission. A high-value man does not chase thoughts blindly. He interrogates them, calmly, directly. He asks himself, is this about forgiveness? Is this about closure? Is this about truth? Or is this about growth? Unfinished emotional loops steal focus. Focus is currency. Focus is power. And power determines the quality of a man's life. In relationships, understanding female psychology helps you see clearly. Silence does not mean absence, and distance does not mean indifference. But the goal is not reunion through fantasy. The goal is mastery. Mastery over reaction. Mastery over meaning. Mastery over direction. That is how a high-value man moves through the world. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." This recurring thought is not blocking your progress. It is shaping it if you allow it to do its job. When you process the lesson fully, whether that means forgiving internally, releasing expectations, or acknowledging what that connection taught you, the loop ends. And when the loop ends, strength returns, because clarity restores momentum. This is why the old Stoic path still works today. It trains you to stand firm without suppressing emotion. It trains you to move forward without inner chaos. This is timeless Stoicism applied to modern life. Calm mind, clear direction, disciplined heart. That is the structure. Remember this: the universe does not haunt men who are lost. It trains men who are ready. And if a name keeps returning to your mind, it is not asking you to go backward. It is demanding that you level up. Extract the wisdom, close the chapter correctly, and move forward stronger, quieter, and more decisive than before. Victory in life is not about controlling people. It is about mastering your inner world. Once you do that, alignment follows, opportunity follows, peace follows, and that is the mark of a man who truly understands the game. Story moment. David was 52 when the pattern finally became impossible to ignore. He had a stable career, grown children, and a life that looked solid from the outside. Yet every night, usually when the house was quiet, the same woman crossed his mind. Not his ex-wife, not a fantasy, just someone from 15 years ago, a colleague he worked closely with during a demanding phase of his life. They never crossed a line. They never even talked about feelings. Then life moved on, or so he thought. At first, David treated the thoughts like noise, stress, aging, boredom. He pushed them aside the way men are taught to do, but the thoughts didn't fade. They returned with precision. Her name, a conversation they never finished, a moment when he chose pride instead of honesty. That's when the old Stoic in him stopped resisting and started observing. He didn't ask, "Why do I miss her?" He asked, "What is unfinished here?" David began journaling. No drama, just facts. What he realized surprised him. He didn't want the woman. He wanted the version of himself he was becoming back then. Focused, alive, purposeful. She had seen that man clearly, and when he walked away without closure, he abandoned more than a connection. He abandoned a lesson. That insight changed everything. From a psychological standpoint, it made sense. He later learned that unresolved emotional bonds often persist quietly, especially when mutual respect existed. That insight aligned with what he'd read about female psychology, not fixation, but lingering meaning. The thought loop wasn't pulling him backward. It was pointing at something incomplete. So, David acted. Not impulsively, intentionally. He didn't reach out to restart anything. He wrote a letter he never sent. In it, he acknowledged the truth he avoided years earlier. He forgave himself for choosing comfort over courage. Then he burned the letter, simple, clean, done. What followed was clarity. The thoughts stopped looping. His energy returned. He began training again, refocused his work, reclaimed discipline. This was Stoicism in practice, using reflection to regain control, not drown in emotion. That's what separates a high-value man from a distracted one. He doesn't chase feelings, he extracts meaning. Months later, David described it best in one sentence. The universe wasn't reminding me of her, it was reminding me of myself. That realization didn't weaken him, it sharpened him. He didn't go backward, he leveled up. And that's the real lesson. When someone stays on your mind, it's rarely about them. It's about who you're being asked to become next. Part 2, they are thinking about you too. When someone keeps popping into your mind day after day, here's the first thing you need to know. Thoughts usually don't go in just one direction. This isn't your imagination. This isn't you overthinking. It's awareness. Life experience and psychology both show that when you think about someone again and again, especially with a real feeling behind it, something is happening on their side too. They're thinking about you as well. Maybe not on purpose, maybe not in a romantic way, But on a mental and emotional level, there's a connection still active. You're not making it up. You're picking up on something real. The human mind is wired for connection. In modern life, attention is fractured, time is scarce, and energy is guarded. So when one person cuts through the noise of your routine, it means something remains unresolved, unfinished meaning, unspoken resonance. Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Shared mental space reveals shared emotional relevance. This is not fantasy. This is how the mind works. You think of someone after years of silence, and suddenly they appear online. You dream of them, and their name resurfaces the next day. That is not randomness. That is synchronization. Psychology calls it emotional memory activation. Two minds, once bonded, trigger the same neural pathways when emotion is attached. The old Stoic thinkers understood this long before science had words for it. The old Stoic taught that whatever occupies your mind deserves examination, not indulgence. This is where Stoicism matters. Stoicism is not about denying feelings, it is about mastering it. A high-value man does not chase emotions blindly. He observes, he studies, he decides. When someone remains in your thoughts, it often means they feel the same pull, but express it differently. This is where understanding female psychology becomes critical. Silence does not mean absence. Restraint does not mean indifference. Female psychology processes emotional bonds inwardly before revealing them outwardly. A high-value man does not guess. He leads. He understands that connection does not require constant communication. It requires clarity. Marcus Aurelius said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This applies here. The question is not why they think of you. The question is what you do with that awareness. Repeated thoughts are signals, not commands. In a world full of distractions, nostalgia, and unfinished conversations, Stoicism keeps you grounded. The old Stoic practiced mastery of self before mastery of others. That discipline sharpens your presence, strengthens your boundaries, elevates your decisions. Distance fades, time bends, but responsibility remains. The man who understands this does not rush. He does not plead. He does not spiral. He stays centered. He stays steady. He lets reality reveal itself. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." Freedom comes from knowing connection does not control you. You control your response to it. When you live grounded in Stoicism, informed by female psychology, guided by the wisdom of the old Stoic, you naturally become a high-value man. Calm under pressure, clear in intention, strong in silence. And when someone thinks of you deeply, they feel that strength whether they speak or not, because real presence is felt, not forced. Mastery always begins in the mind. Story moment. A boy once loved a girl deeply. Life pulled them in different directions and they separated, not because love ended, but because timing did. Years later, the boy became successful, yet something inside him always felt unfinished. Night after night, thoughts of her returned, her laugh, her calm, her eyes, not on purpose. It just happened. At the same time, somewhere else in the world, that same girl felt emotions she couldn't explain. While cooking, while walking, while hearing a familiar song, his presence crossed her mind without warning. That is the connection. He thought of her. She felt him. They didn't speak, but something still spoke between them. That's what happens when someone stays on your mind. Love, even in silence, still echoes. First truth. Don't dismiss repeated thoughts as coincidence. Be aware. Psychology tips show that strong emotional bonds don't fade easily. Love psychology explains that the mind holds on to what once mattered deeply. When thoughts return again and again, they carry meaning. Second truth. Don't confuse silence with absence. Be clear. Relationship goals are not always about going back. Sometimes they're about understanding what shaped you. A modern Stoic observes emotions instead of reacting to them. He stays grounded. He learns the lesson without chasing the feeling. Third truth, don't ignore what your mind repeats. Be intentional. Psychology tips remind us that repetition signals importance. Love psychology shows that shared moments create lasting mental connections. You must decide what to do with that awareness, reflect, accept, and move forward with clarity. This is not about regret, it's about recognition. A modern Stoic understands that thoughts are signals, not commands. When someone stays on your mind, something real once existed. That truth doesn't control you, it strengthens you if you understand it. Part 3, your energy is reaching them. Here's the truth most people never tell you, and it deserves your full attention. When someone lives in your mind constantly, when they appear in your thoughts without permission and stay longer than logic allows, something real is happening beneath the surface. You are not imagining it, you are not being foolish, and you are not alone in this experience. You may believe your thoughts are quiet, that they are sealed off, that they stay safely inside your head, but that is not how the mind works. Thoughts carry energy. Emotion amplifies that energy, and energy moves, whether you acknowledge it or not. Every time you think of someone with genuine feeling, care, longing, concern, affection, your mind does more than remember them. It sends something outward. This is where psychology tips meet lived human experience. Your brain and body create emotional signals. Those signals don't stop at your skull. They influence posture, breathing, focus, sleep, and behavior. They also shape connections. That's why, so often, the moment someone crosses your mind, they text you, call you, or suddenly reappear. Don't dismiss this too quickly. Don't rush to label it coincidence. Be curious instead. Psychology shows that humans are highly sensitive to subtle cues, emotional memory, and unconscious attunement. When two people have shared meaning, especially romantic or emotionally charged meaning, their minds remain linked through association. That link doesn't vanish just because time passes or communication slows. That is why they might suddenly feel unsettled without knowing why. That is why their chest tightens, or warms, or feels restless late at night. They may not consciously think of you, but their nervous system reacts anyway. This is how deep connection behaves. It moves quietly. It bypasses logic. It shows up as a sensation before thought. Be honest with yourself. When you think of them, do you feel calm or alert? Do you feel drawn or protective? That feeling is information. It's your system responding to an emotional bond that still exists. Love advice often focuses on words and actions, but this is the layer beneath that, the silent layer where attachment lives and lingers. You don't need constant contact to maintain it. You don't need daily conversations to stay present in someone's inner world. Emotional memory doesn't expire on a schedule. The brain doesn't forget meaningful people easily because it is designed to protect what once mattered. That is why, even from far away, even after time has passed, they may suddenly think of you while driving or lying awake in the dark. This isn't an obsession. Don't label it that. It's a connection trying to resolve itself. Psychology tips tell us that unresolved emotional loops stay active until they find closure, clarity, or renewal. That's not a weakness. That's how the human mind seeks balance. Here's what many men overlook. This does not mean you should chase. Don't push. Don't intrude. That breaks the signal. Be grounded instead. Be steady. Energy responds to calm certainty, not pressure. When you hold someone in your mind with warmth instead of anxiety, with acceptance instead of demand, the connection feels safe on both ends. Dating tips often talk about strategy, but this is about alignment. When two people are emotionally tuned, they sense each other without effort. That's why they might feel an unexplained urge to reach out. That's why a memory surfaces for no clear reason. That's why something shifts inside them, even if they can't name it. You must understand this clearly. Silence does not equal absence. Distance does not equal disconnection, and time does not automatically weaken emotional bonds. Sometimes it sharpens them, especially when both people are still carrying the same unresolved meaning. Be patient with that truth. Don't rush to control it. Let it breathe. Let it unfold naturally. When someone stays on your mind, it's often because part of them is still in conversation with you, below the level of words. That conversation happens through emotion, memory, and bodily response. Love advice that ignores this misses the most powerful part of human bonding. You don't need to explain it to anyone else. You just need to recognize it. Be aware, be intentional, be calm, and most importantly, don't confuse connection with urgency. Awareness is not action. Feeling is not force. Let the connection guide you toward clarity, not confusion. That is how mature attraction works. That is how real alignment feels. And that is why, when someone is on your mind all the time, your energy isn't trapped inside you, it's already moving, already reaching, already being felt. Story moment. Once there was a woman who couldn't stop thinking about a man she once loved, not in a dramatic way, not in regret, just a quiet, steady presence in her mind. Years had passed. They had gone their separate ways. She had built a new life. He had built his. From the outside, the story looked finished. But the mind doesn't care about timelines. The heart doesn't follow calendars. Every night before she fell asleep, his memory returned. Not with pain, not with longing that burned, but with peace. A calm remembrance, a soft emotional echo. That matters. Because when a memory shows up without struggle, it means it has settled deep. Love psychology teaches us that unresolved emotional bonds don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper. Sometimes they arrive quietly, like a familiar song playing in another room. And somewhere in another city, the man would wake up at exactly 3 a.m. No alarm, no noise, just a sudden emotional shift, a feeling he couldn't explain. His chest felt heavier, then warmer. His thoughts drifted without effort. He'd reach for his phone, half asleep, and see her face appear in an old photo memory, and he'd whisper, almost annoyed at himself, "Why am I thinking about her tonight?" Don't ignore moments like that. They are signals, not accidents. That was her energy reaching him, not magic, not fantasy. Energy, in psychology tips terms, is attention combined with emotion. When the mind revisits someone with calm intensity, the body responds. When two people once shared meaning, their nervous systems remember. That invisible thread still existed between them, even after years of silence. Silence does not erase connection. Be clear about that. True connections don't disappear. They change form. They transform into emotional memory, into patterns stored deep in the brain. Relationship goals aren't only about building something new. Sometimes they are about understanding what still lives quietly within you. That's why this story matters. It shows the first truth. When someone stays on your mind, your presence still exists in theirs, often without either of you trying. Don't confuse this with a call to act impulsively. That is not strength. Be steady instead. Modern Stoic thinking reminds us that awareness does not demand reaction. It demands understanding. You must observe before you move. When a thought returns consistently, it's not asking you to chase, it's asking you to listen. Psychology tips explain that the brain holds on to emotionally meaningful connections as a form of continuity. It's how we maintain identity. It's how we measure safety and familiarity. That's why the man woke at 3 a.m. The mind is quieter then. Defenses are down. Emotional memory moves freely. Love psychology shows us that the body often reacts before the mind can explain it. Don't dismiss that invisible thread, but don't romanticize it either. Be grounded. Be honest. Ask yourself what the connection represents now, not what it was back then. Relationship goals at this stage of life aren't about chasing old chapters. They're about integrating lessons without bitterness. That's the deeper message of this story. The connection didn't fade because it was real. It transformed because both people grew. Energy doesn't cling, it flows. When handled with calm respect, it brings clarity instead of confusion. That is modern Stoic wisdom applied to human connection. So remember this, when someone is on your mind repeatedly, something is happening beneath awareness, not drama, not destiny, but emotional resonance. Don't rush it. Don't fight it. Be present with it. Understand it. That is how a grounded man moves forward, aware, composed, and in control of his inner world. And that, quietly, is how real connection continues to speak, even when words are no longer exchanged. Bonus. Part 4. There is an unfinished emotional connection. When someone stays on your mind constantly, it often means there is an emotional connection that hasn't been fully resolved. This doesn't always mean you're meant to be with them. Sometimes it means there were words left unsaid. Sometimes emotions were buried instead of expressed. Sometimes a chapter ends too suddenly for your heart to understand. Your mind keeps returning to that person because your soul is still trying to make sense of the experience. Psychology tells us that the brain seeks closure, but spiritually, this goes even deeper. God allows certain people to linger in our thoughts, not to trap us in the past, but to invite healing. That memory isn't there to hurt you, it's there to show you what still needs attention. Maybe it's forgiveness, maybe it's acceptance, maybe it's learning to let go without resentment. Once you acknowledge the emotion instead of fighting it, the connection begins to loosen. Peace doesn't come from forgetting, it comes from understanding. And when that understanding arrives, your heart becomes lighter, calmer, and more aligned with where God is leading you next. Part 5. You are being prepared for growth. When someone occupies your thoughts again and again, when their presence lingers in your mind no matter how much time has passed, it is often not an accident. It is often a sign that God is doing a quiet work within you. You are being prepared for growth, even if it doesn't feel comfortable right now. Every person who leaves a deep imprint on your heart and mind comes carrying a lesson. Not everyone is meant to walk with you forever, but everyone is meant to teach you something meaningful. Some people come as blessings, others come as lessons wrapped in pain, but none of them come without purpose. God uses relationships, memories, and even emotional discomfort as tools to shape you. He uses them to stretch your heart, refine your character, and guide you toward a stronger, wiser version of yourself. What feels like confusion is often preparation. What feels like loss is often transformation. That person who keeps returning to your thoughts may have been sent to teach you powerful truths, such as what you truly deserve and what you should never settle for again, what you are no longer called to tolerate, excuse, or endure, how deeply and sincerely you are capable of loving, or how important it is to trust God fully instead of clinging tightly to people. Sometimes God allows attachment so you can learn discernment. Sometimes He allows distance so you can learn dependence on Him. And sometimes He allows heartbreak so your faith can grow roots deeper than your emotions. When the lesson has been learned, something beautiful happens. The emotional grip begins to loosen, not through force, not through denial, and not through struggle. It fades naturally, quietly, gently. You don't have to fight it. You simply gain clarity. And with that clarity comes growth. You begin to see yourself with stronger self-worth. Your faith deepens because you've learned to lean on God instead of fear. Your mind becomes more peaceful because you're no longer resisting the process, and your heart slowly opens, ready to receive new blessings without carrying old wounds. This is why you must trust the process, even when you don't understand it. God never allows emotional connections without intention. He never wastes your tears, your prayers, or your waiting. If someone is on your mind all the time, it does not mean you are weak. It does not mean you are broken, and it does not mean you are moving backward. Often, it means something is being built within you: faith, wisdom, strength, and surrender. And what comes next, when you finally let go with faith, not fear, may be far greater than what you are holding on to now. Sometimes God removes what feels familiar so he can make room for what is aligned. Sometimes he closes a chapter so the next one can begin with peace. Be patient with yourself. Be gentle with your heart. God is not finished with you yet. Reflection moment. Close your eyes for a moment and let the noise fall away. When someone stays on your mind all the time, something meaningful is happening beneath the surface. This is where quiet psychology tips meet lived experience. Think of that one person who keeps showing up in your thoughts, uninvited but persistent. Don't fight it. Don't rush to label it. Don't turn it into a story that unsettles you. Just breathe and stay with it. Because the mind doesn't cling without a reason, and the heart doesn't repeat a name unless there is a lesson attached. Ask yourself what this connection is pointing toward, and be honest. Sometimes the answer is not romance. Sometimes it is recognition. Sometimes it is not desire, but direction. Sometimes it is not attachment, but awareness. That is where real love advice begins. Not with chasing feelings, but with understanding them. This is the first thing happening when someone lives in your thoughts. The bond is acting like a mirror. It reflects a part of you that wants attention, healing, or clarity. And that reflection works both ways because human connection is subtle, emotional, and deeply psychological. This is why many dating tips miss the deeper truth. Repeated thoughts are less about possession and more about meaning. Be still and ask what this presence is teaching you. Be open to the idea that it may be showing you how to open up, how to soften, how to forgive, or how to finally release something you've been carrying for a long time. These are not accidents. These are signals. And psychology tips remind us that signals are meant to be read, not ignored. The second thing happening is emotional resonance. Unfinished feelings echo until they are understood, not resolved by action, but by insight. The brain revisits what hasn't been completed, what hasn't been named, what hasn't been learned from yet. Don't distract yourself. Don't numb the thought. Don't dismiss it. Be curious instead. Curiosity turns confusion into growth, and growth changes how you see yourself. Often, the person on your mind represents a chapter, a turning point, or a version of yourself you once were, or still want to become. That realization alone can bring relief. The third thing happening is alignment. When someone stays in your mind, it often means your values, hopes, or emotional patterns are brushing up against theirs. That friction creates awareness. Not always comfort, but always information. This is powerful love advice, especially for men who were taught to treat emotions like problems to solve instead of messages to hear. Don't chase the thought. Don't dramatize it. Don't turn it into pressure. Understand it. Understanding calms the nervous system. Understanding gives you control without force. Remember this, sometimes thinking about someone is not about missing them. It's about meeting yourself. It's about recognizing what your inner life is asking for right now. Connection, closure, courage. When you accept that, dating tips stop being tactics and start being truths. Clarity always beats strategy. Presence always beats pursuit. That is one of the most grounded psychology tips you can carry with you. Be patient with your thoughts. Be respectful of your emotions. Be honest about what you feel without rushing to act. Reflection is not inactivity, it is preparation. When you listen instead of running, when you learn instead of resisting, you grow. And growth changes how you show up in every relationship, romantic or otherwise. That is why the best love advice is often quiet. It doesn't shout. It stays. It guides you toward a steadier heart, a clearer mind, and a deeper understanding of why some people cross your path not to stay forever, but to teach you something that lasts. When someone is on your mind all the time, remember these three truths, not as a fantasy, not as a coincidence, but as something worth noticing, because thoughts that return again and again are never random. First truth, your energy is reaching them. Your energy is reaching them. They can feel your emotion even from afar. You don't need to believe in anything mystical to understand this. You've felt it before. You walk into a room and sense tension without a word being spoken. You think of someone and your chest tightens for no clear reason. That is emotional awareness at work. Psychology tips often remind us that emotion is not passive. It moves, it carries direction. When someone stays in your mind, your thoughts are charged with feeling, and feeling leaves an imprint. Don't brush this off. Be honest with yourself. Deep focus carries weight. In love psychology, this is called emotional resonance. Two people don't need to speak to feel each other. They only need to have once mattered. Second truth, they are thinking of you too. They are thinking of you too. That invisible thread between your souls still connects. Connections don't end just because conversations do. They don't dissolve simply because time passes. Think of it like an old song. You may stop playing it, but the melody still lives somewhere inside you. That invisible thread isn't pulling you backward. It's reminding you that something real once existed. Relationship goals that last are never built on constant contact. They're built on mutual impact. Don't assume silence means absence. Don't assume distance means disconnection. Be grounded. Be calm. Modern Stoic thinking teaches this clearly. You don't chase what you feel, you observe it. Understanding a connection doesn't mean acting on it. It means respecting what it once taught you. Third truth, the universe is giving you a message. The universe is giving you a message. There's a reason you can't stop thinking of them. Every repeated thought carries information. Ignore it, and it returns louder. Don't see that connection as pain. See it as purpose. Maybe they weren't meant to stay, but they were meant to awaken something in you. Maybe they weren't part of your future, but they were sent to shape your heart for it. That is how growth works. Not everything that matters lasts forever. Psychology tips rooted in experience say this clearly. Memory is not an enemy. It's a mirror. Every thought has a reason. Every connection has a season. And every person who crosses your mind carries a message from the universe. You must ask yourself one simple question. What did this connection change in me? Understanding what it really means. So the next time someone won't leave your thoughts, smile gently and say, I understand now. This isn't just my mind, it's my soul remembering. Because souls never forget each other. Even when time, distance, and silence separate them, they find each other again, in thought, in dreams, in feeling. And sometimes that's where true love lives, not in presence, not in words, but in the quiet corners of your mind, where their memory still feels like home. This isn't about longing, it's about meaning. Modern Stoic men don't deny emotion, they learn from it. They let memories exist without letting them control their future. They respect the past without being trapped inside it. That balance is strength. Final reflection. If someone has been on your mind lately, this is your sign that the connection between you still exists, somewhere, somehow. They may be far away, but your thoughts are the bridge. And tonight, when you think of them, maybe they'll feel a sudden warmth in their heart without knowing it's you. That, my friend, is the beautiful mystery of souls. It's why love psychology continues to speak to men who've lived long enough to understand loss and meaning. It's why relationship goals evolve from passion into wisdom. It's why psychology tips grounded in truth last longer than trends. And it's why modern Stoic thinking doesn't harden the heart, it sharpens it. Welcome to Blessing of Stoicism. If you're curious about the hidden truths of the mind and heart, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a fact that could change the way you see.